neighborhood?
I don't know. Something very strange. There's lights.
Sir, I need your address. I'm going to send the police.
Lights. These bright lights.
What lights?
They're outside the window. They're coming in.
I'm going to go ahead and pull your number
so
up.
Bright.
And I'm going to send the police to your house.
They're blinding me. These lights are...
Sir, I want you to stay on the phone with me.
This is a desperate situation.
The police will be there in 10 minutes.
February 19th, 1991, 10:21 p.m. Nightclub singer John Connors calls 911 with a frantic message. Chicago police arrive at Connors' West Side home 20 minutes later. Connors is not found inside. 48 hours later, at the request of his sister, he is listed as a missing person. John Scott Connors was born April 2nd, 1946. The second child of Chicagoans Jerome and Manya Connors. Jerome was a semi-pro figure skater who managed his uncle's West Side rink. His wife, Manya, was from a Polish vaudeville family, and her theatrical flair was evident even at her wedding, setting a new world record for the highest number of bridesmaids. Shortly after John was born, the family settled into a modest bungalow next to Chicago's Midway Airport. With her new home and baby, Manya viewed this as a sign of great promise for both her family and her own aspirations.
We had this beautiful little house. It had sort of roses all up the sides, this nice little ranch house, and it was really, I would say it was a perfect setting to grow up in, just a really nice surroundings if you didn't mind. There was a little noise sometimes overhead from the jets that would go. But, of course, that was not a problem because Mother always had little Johnny singing at the top of his lungs to try and drown out the planes. And quite often I would say he succeeded. Sometimes I think I might not have minded hearing the planes instead of John, but, you know, that was how Mom wanted it.
I think she secretly wanted to be a star, but, you know, she was a big Polish woman, and, you know, she was like a little chunky, to say the least. So she didn't really have what it took to be a chorus girl, and she wasn't quite freakish enough to get in the circus. So she sort of fell between the cracks. And, of course, she married his father, who's like sort of an ice skating star. And I think it was a weird competitive thing, like, she wanted Johnny, as she used to say, to sort of like take her place in the sort of competition with his father. It was very, I think the psychological term would be like weird. It was very weird.
Whatever Manya's motivations, she encouraged little Johnny to sing in public, whenever, wherever he could, starting him on a promising career as a child performer.
Manya's big first idea for John was an ice nativity scene where her husband Jerome and some of his ice folly pals would play the wise men, do some sort of skating juggling act, and they would throw little John in ecstasy between them. And, you know, there would be an ox and an ass and a camel with a couple of humps, and the humps would actually be little trampolines. And she had this all written. She had pages and pages of sketches. Like, I just couldn't believe it.
It's a little hard for me to talk about my mother growing up, because sometimes I felt like we were in different houses or something. It was just, everything was John. It was just so much John. John singing, and, you know, isn't John cute? And let's have a party for John. And, you know, when the whole music career thing started, it was just John, John, John.
Of course, Manya was like extremely pushy, and somehow she managed to get little Johnny to sing that song on Ding Dong School. You know, this is my teapot, on the teapot, watch me pour me out in the spout, and like all those horrible songs they forced kids to sing in those days.
John on Ding Dong School. He's going to be on national TV. You know, everybody's got to know about it. Like, they're not going to see him on the TV set. No, they got to see him in our house. We got to have the friends over. We got to have the relatives over. We have this big bash. Everybody's there. And here's me, you know. I mean, where am I in this? Where am I
The Connors family and friends celebrated John's upcoming debut on the local kiddie show. However, on live television, John's constitution didn't prove to be as sturdy as his stage mother's.
Ding dong, ding dong, ding. Good morning.
Yeah, that was a laugh, wasn't it? I'll tell you this. I could have got through Teapot. I could have got through the entire song Teapot without crapping in my pants. That was John.
There was quite a stink in the studio, and it was a little bit exacerbated by those hot camera lights they had in the studio in those days.
The embarrassing episode brought an ultimatum from Jerome regarding his son's show business career.
My dad actually put his foot down for a change, and he stood up to my mom and he said, John is not going to perform, not until he's 16. And I was never sure why he did that. I mean, everybody thought, you know, it's so stressful on little John, and that this was too big a responsibility for a little boy to be trying to do this and to be, you know, pushed into showbiz at such an early age, and to be achieving all this fame and glory and fortune and whatever at the age of 5. But I was never sure if it was that or if it was just that he was so completely and utterly humiliated by that event that he never wanted to go through it again. You know, he's just saying, if my kid goes out, he's just going to make a disaster of this and everybody's going to laugh at me.
With his singing career on hold, John and his family tried to settle into a normal suburban life, focused on home, school, and church.
Mania, like many Polish women, was an ostentatiously devout Catholic. She'd never let you forget. In fact, on that big cake after Ding Dong School in the party, there was a giant crucifix on the cake, a crucifix made out of frosting. She was always like letting her, you know, putting her devoutness in your face. There was a huge portrait of the bleeding heart of Jesus right in the front door, and it never failed that she'd look at the portrait and use that accent of hers and go, bye, they killed him. Bye, Jesus, he was so good to us. Why, bye. And I just sort of like slither under her skirts and join my pal John.
But the events of 1959 would change the Connors family forever. In 1959, Jerome Connors took a job in the Ice Follies national tour. With the children older, Manya chose to work part-time cleaning offices. This meant more time alone after school for John and older sister SHERL.
SHERL? Everybody ignored SHERL. In fact, John used to joke that he was really like an only child.
Okay, well, so I had this special little doggy, Sparky. And the thing is, Sparky's birthday was coming up, and that was a pretty special event in my life. You know, I mean, I don't know when he was really born, but, you know, the day that he came into my life was a special thing for me. I was very attached to that little dog. I mean, just first because he was my dog, and second of all because my dad bought it for me just to make me happy. One time, though, I was calling Sparky. I was down in the basement and I kept saying, Sparky, Sparky. You know, I was just expecting that he would come and his little tail would be wiggling and he'd be just happy to see me, but he didn't come, and he didn't come, and he didn't come. And I went up to find Sparky, and I found him in the middle of the living room floor, and he was flattened. I mean, he was just completely flattened. And there was a broken television set next to him. And there were some little footprints in the blood leading away, and John never did explain exactly what happened that day. He said that there was some sort of an accident, and Sparky must have knocked the television over on himself. I find that somewhat hard to believe, but that's what John said happened. And it was shortly after that my dad left, so I sort of lost Sparky and my dad in pretty quick succession.
When you consider that the only job Manya had was as a janitress in an office building, she had all kinds of shady connections. And somehow, on John's 16th birthday, she didn't waste any time. She got John his first singing gig at Sam Giancana's nightclub.
Well, Mother used to sometimes make a big deal out of her connections, or I might say her perceived connections. She used to sometimes hint at this big dark, connection with her and the mob, but I mean, what's that all about? I emptied ashtrays for Sam Giancana. I mean, come on, she was a cleaning woman. But somehow, through this connection, I believe they met downtown. I think she was working. I'm sure she was, shoveling trash or something for him at one of his offices. And I think it was down there that she met him originally, but it was through that connection that she got John a gig singing at Villa Venice.
The Villa Venice was in Wheeling, and Sam Giancana, a businessman, built Villa Venice.
And she sat him down and said, "You're going to be singing at this nightclub." She still kept her stupid Polish accent all the time. "You will be singing at this nightclub. You will sing." I wish I could do her accent. "You could sing. You'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy yourself." She kept insisting on that. I remember how panicked John was. He didn't know what to sing. So we raided the record cabinet, and all there were like these old Frank Sinatra albums and stuff like that. So we just frantically learned 2 or 3 of these songs by heart. And I frankly thought he was going to shit his pants again.
And he sang like the old standards, the old Neapolitan love songs. He covered a lot of Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra songs, and sang a lot of the standards. So, and I tell you, my heart just melted when I saw him. I just fell in love on the spot.
Under Manya's tutelage, John's club gigs increased, as well as his local celebrity status.
We formed the CBGB'S in 1963. And we started meeting after school. We were all sophomores in high school. And we would ride down to Mr. Kelly's on the train to go see Johnny play, go see some of his gigs. And he had us set up at a table right in front by the stage, and he would sing songs to us, and we would joke around. And those were just marvelous times. I would have to say that those were the first years that we met as the CBGB'S. Those were the best years of my life.
I've read some of these articles that John had a lot of success among teeny boppers, but I mean, I guess what I have to say about that is, teeny boppers listen to anything. They do now, they always have. You can't say that they really have developed taste. They go for anything that's a little different, anything that's odd, anything that's out of the ordinary in any way, what good or bad, just different.
John was sweet. He never put us down. He treated us like ladies. He was always a gentleman. He never made us feel like we were a bunch of sluts, like these groupies that would follow after, Mick Jagger and Harry Connick Jr. who is, as far as I'm concerned, they could not be a pimple on John Connor's ass.
Perhaps his newfound fame gave John the confidence to venture away from Manya and cut the apron strings for good.
We kind of got the impression that Manya, the CBGB'S, we got the impression that Manya was very overbearing, and she really pushed John. And she both helped and hindered his career.
Well, John tended to change personas like other people change their underwear. I mean, he would go from this fad to that fad. He struck out for San Francisco and was doing this kind of beatnik sort of thing. I don't even know if that's the right term, whatever. And I'm not sure what was causing that, and I don't want to make any insinuations. I'm not sure whether there may or may not have been drugs involved. I don't know what this was, but something sent him out there, and quite frankly, I didn't mind having the distance.
John's move to San Francisco during that infamous summer of love would establish him in relationships that would impact his life and career for years to come.
Well, I met John at the Purple Onion in 1966. It was I remember that night. It was a dark night, it was raining, and there was nobody in the shop. And the little guy comes in, he's very young. He looks like a young Frankie Avalon. And I noticed him in the corner, and he ordered a cup of coffee. And he just seemed like he was on his own, and he had no one to take care of him. And so, I kind of took him under my wing and sat down with him and started talking to him. And, he just had this boyish charm that just, came out of him that was so attractive to me.
I first met John Connors in the late 60s, 67 in San Francisco at the Purple Onion. John was opening for Toady Fields at the time. That was when she still had both legs. And I spotted right away that he had talent, that I knew he could go places, and I knew that there was something about him that was unique and that we could work with. And John Connors was one of my clients for about 9 years total, 67 to 69, and then another period, about 78 to 85. And I have several other clients. Currently I manage the Harmonettes, all-woman group you may have seen on television. And I've had several other big names you've probably heard of before.
So after the show, we had a couple of drinks, and I said, well, why don't you come over to my house? And we'll have, we'll just get stoned, we'll smoke a few joints. And he had never gotten high before, so he was, really impressionable, and so we got high, and then, one thing led to another, and then we slept together. And, after we had sex, he proposed to me, and, this was the summer of love, so I said, oh, of course, because, everyone was just getting married, and people were just trying new things out. So, we called up, Phyllis Diller and Toady Fields, and they decided to come in and be part of the ceremony.
John got married out in San Francisco. We were happy for him. We were sad for ourselves because we all thought that there were maybe a couple of us that could have filled those house shoes pretty well. But we were very sorry for John because we knew John was lonely out there. He didn't have us to show up at his gigs and to be supportive.
Despite their hasty wedding plans, it would only be a matter of time before Rosa would meet the other woman in John's life.
And I said, oh my God, your mother's coming in. We had nothing ready, and she was like this really hardcore traditional value Polish woman. And, I threw together this tofu turkey thing, in a couple of hours, and she showed up in the door with these two really, overstuffed suitcases. And she had this kind of, grayish house coat coat on, and she was a big woman. I mean, you know, she had some bronze with her. She was really red-faced, and she had these bulging varicose veins that were just so disgusting I couldn't look at them. And she tried to hide them with these rolled-up knee-high pantyhose. And she came in and she said, "Oh, Johnny, I've missed you so much. You know, we miss you in the Midwest. You know, your father, blah 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 blah." And she started going on, and she was completely ignoring me. And I was sitting here with this tofu turkey in my hand, which I very carefully crafted into the shape of that bird. And she said, "What is this? Where is the kielbasa?" And I said, "Kielbasa?" And I looked at John like, you know, what's that? I'm not Polish, you know, my family's Italian. So I didn't know what to do. And she says, "Oh, this what I do, you know." And then she says, "Oh, Johnny, what has happened to you? You don't eat meat anymore." I mean, this woman, that's all she ate her whole life was meat. So I went to the back room. You know, the only thing I think of was like, oh my God, I've got to save this whole situation. I threw my accordion and I played the Too Fat polka. And you know, I was like bellowing, these chords were going on. And she, all of a sudden, it was like her face just totally changed. And she was so happy, and she was dancing this polka with Johnny around the dining room table. And you know, she wrapped her arms around me, and I still had my accordion on. And she goes, "Oh, you are my babushka. I love you very much. Everything is fine." And she went ahead and ate the tofu turkey. I couldn't believe it, you know. And she didn't say a word about kielbasa the whole time we were there.
Though John's marriage lasted only 3 months, it revealed to Rosa an addiction of John's that had been previously known only to his family.
John used to sometimes eat paper, of all things. And I don't mean he would sample it. It's like with John, it somehow became like a dietary staple. I mean, it seemed like sometimes he wouldn't very much eat dinner, but we would find certain sections of the newspaper missing later.
Something's going on that's really strange here. I wonder if John's eating my origami. But now I was working on my coup de grace, my masterpiece, this wonderful scene of Paris with the Eiffel Tower and the Champs-Élysées. And I had it all set up, and John was still at home, and I left, and I started noticing like parts of my origami, you know, being like torn up, or like someone had been eating it or something. It was very odd. I didn't really say anything because I thought, well, you know, maybe it's just some bugs or something that are getting into it. So I do a little repair, you know, and get it fixed again. But it just kept going on, and then more and more of it started getting eaten. Like the Arc de Triomphe was almost half gone. And then I thought, well, this is odd, you know. And I noticed these little like teeth marks. And sure enough, the next night I came home earlier than he expected, and I opened the door, and the whole Eiffel Tower was like in his mouth. And I said, "What are you doing eating my origami?" It was like his little vindictive way of saying that the marriage was over.
After a quickie divorce, John threw himself into his music career, and in 1969 was about to get his first big break.
Things were moving well, picking up. We were getting lots of club dates up and down the coast. I heard this song that John did called Nature Boy, and so I asked John if he's interested in doing an album. We got the studio space. I put up the money for the album. I fronted the money, and we cut the album with Nature Boy was the big hit.
And I was driving along, and I heard, you know, Nature Boy on WCFL. And I remember it was like the hot summer hits on WCFL. And I was just thrilled. Oh, I cannot tell you, that song, Nature Boy, it took me to another plane of existence. And of course, the CBGB'S were very excited about it for John. We were happy for John because John had been like an opening act for so long, and we thought that this was his big break.
Then I saw a side of John that I really didn't like, a sort of snooty side. I just remember once me and my girlfriend were at a Japanese restaurant, and he was sitting with some very glamorous looking people, And I passed by and said, "Hi, John," and he just coldly said, "Well, hi." And I walked down, and I really fulminated on the dark side of fame.
I heard it back then, of course, but I never went as far as buying the record. I just honestly didn't feel like it was value for my money.
Very strange. I could never figure it out. The album appears in the Billboard charts. There's no money behind the album. There's no advertising behind the album. Who the fuck was buying this album?
While Manya was able to revel in John's success, sadly Jerome would not be able to witness his son's good fortune, as he was run down in a tragic Zamboni accident. John had his father buried with a copy of Nature Boy.
I think if we'd continued in that vein, we could have done a couple more albums, but that didn't work out.
More albums would not be possible, as fate would soon thrust John into the most horrific episode of his career and lifetime.
Well, this agent of his, who called himself Louis DELMAR, claimed that he'd gotten John a gig on the Mike Douglas show, which in those days was a big deal. No one knows who Mike Douglas is now.
I called a lot of people in New York and LA, and finally, with pulling some strings and calling in some favors from years before, we were able to get him booked on the Mike Douglas show, and that was in '69, I believe it was, in the winter time. And so John was and the band were decided to drive all the way from San Francisco to Philadelphia, where the Mike Douglas show was taped. And it was on live, I believe, at that time. And I thought they should just fly. It's much easier to fly, much faster. But John was always one to kind of save money. He was a little bit on the cheap side, if you know what I mean. And so they got in this van or whatever together, and they started driving, and we were all worried when they didn't show up in Philadelphia at the time of for the show, and we didn't know what happened to them, and we were calling the police, and at the time there was this huge blizzard in Pennsylvania, and apparently they got trapped in this blizzard and were stuck in this rest area along the highway, and had no food for several days, and there was a big controversy whether members of this group had actually engaged in cannibalism.
And I think that the media just blew that whole thing out of proportion.
John's agent Delmar advised John to call a press conference.
The 3 weeks was horrifying, and several minutes and hours of it I have no recollection of. All I can say about this incident that it was a very stressful situation, and I'm just glad that the three of us got out in almost all of one piece, and I'd like to give my apologies to my condolences to the family of Levon Pickles, my drummer. As to the question about the weight gain of several of the other two members of my band, I cannot attest to that. I personally ate mostly the paper towels that were in the bathroom. If there was a stew made one night, which I thought was rabbit, I didn't know what was in it, so I can't attest to the missing parts on Mr. Pickles. I'd like to say that my new album, John Connor Sings the Hits of Today, will be coming out in August. we're going to have to find a new drummer. Any other questions?
After he came out of that blizzard incident, and the media was blowing up because he had to eat some people to survive, which, you know, the Donner Party had to eat people to survive. And I think that history judges them pretty kindly.
God, I don't know. I don't think so. John ate meat. I know he was a meat eater, but and I know people do strange things when they're starving, but I really think he ate anybody. But you know, it got a lot of press, and we could have turned it to our advantage if he'd let me do that. But he ran. We could have gotten through that.
I would surely never ever insinuate that John would do something like cannibalize a dead body. I mean, that's just a horrible thing to contemplate. John and I have had our differences over the years, of course, but I would still never say anything like that. I guess I would just say one thing, though. I don't know. There something that was kind of unexplained at the time that my dog Sparky met with his untimely death. He was squashed by a television. Okay, well, he wasn't all completely in one piece. You would expect that, being squashed by a television. But the odd thing was that there were some pieces missing, and that was never explained. We never found those bits.
I think if we could have gotten over that, and he had stayed with me as manager, we could have continued. But there was that period where he just wanted to get away from the media, get away from the public, and just be a recluse and not have anything to do with anybody, and that included me. And I told him I could get him some gigs, I could get him back on track, get his career rolling again, but he wouldn't listen.
With the blizzard incident behind him, John tried to block out any memory of his past, including his bandmates and his previous act.
I advised him to stick with the standards, because that's what he started with as a kid. That's what he sang, and he kept insisting on singing the pop tunes of the day. He kept wanting to update his musical repertoire all the time. He had to be, what's hot this week, what's hot this month, and singing the what the kids wanted to hear. And I think that was part of the problem with his career, is it was up and down. And if he'd stuck with the standards and found a niche, you got to have a niche. That's what this business is all about. You find a niche for yourself, and you stick with it. And John never found his niche.
I never understood it because we didn't know where he was coming from, but, you know, we loved John. And we supported John's efforts to do what he needed to do to grow as an artist.
During the early 1970s, when traditional supper clubs would not hire him, John found work on the occasional local television variety show.
And now here she is, the girl who makes the scene every week on Kitty A Go-Go, Pandora!
And here is my brother John on Kitty A Go-Go. I was mortified. I mean, it was just like, here he goes again. Here he goes again. He has zero regard for the rest of the family and how he embarrasses us in front of the world. On UHF, no less.
He was just like giving it away. And we were like, John, you don't have to do this crap with a capital K on public access shows. You are a talent. You had a hit record. He was the king of UHF, you know?
They glow unbearably bright. Need I say that my love's misspent with angel eyes tonight? And so I'm offering this simple phrase to kids from 1 to 92. although it's been said many times, many ways. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
1975 closed with John's spirit sagging. However, the new year was around the corner, and so was a new love and career comeback.
I remember he went with the singing chef to a music convention in Nashville, and he'd gotten together with Skeeter Davis. I think there was some mix-up, like he'd accidentally stolen her purse or something like that. I mean, not stolen it, but walked away with it. And they hooked up, and Skeeter liked Nature Boy enough that out of some sense of nostalgia or duty, she got John some gigs singing at Opryland.
And they were drawing big crowds, big crowds. They opened for Mel Tillis and Minnie Pearl. You know, they got very friendly with her, and she helped John a lot. So it was a very positive move for him.
He did a very good cover of he sang the song I'm Not Lisa. Of course, he changed the gender. His version was I'm Not Larry. And he had a hit with that. But his career fizzled in Opryland, and of course Skeeter lost interest.
And I got him booked into CBGB'S in New York, opening for the Ramones, and it's a punk club, and part of the attraction that they wanted, and John, I never told John this, but it was the cannibalism incident. That's one of the reasons that they wanted him to perform there, because it was such a curiosity. It had been in all the tabloids, and people just found it rather interesting.
He was very popular at the club because he was so different. I don't think that a lot of the kids then, and they really were kids, they were, well, I shouldn't say this, but they were anywhere from 15 to 14 to 19. They'd never heard anybody like him before. They hadn't heard melody. They hadn't heard lyrics. The punk stuff was so much different and wonderful in its own way. I think that there were some of the audience was laughing at him because they hadn't a clue as to what he was doing, because it was so different. But I think at the same time that because his lyrics were filled with emotion and memory, that they found this very laughable. They didn't have any emotions. They didn't have any memory.
The kids liked it, but they didn't like it as their music. They liked it as a novelty, as a curiosity. They were really laughing at him. And I don't think he understood that, partly because I didn't want him to. I didn't want to tell him that he was really a comic. He was being laughed at, and because he wouldn't have done it. He wouldn't have performed. And so I told them that they liked his music, they liked his songs, that he was making a resurgence, he was making a comeback.
You you never saw a star treat his fans more like gold than Johnny Connors. Johnny was a prince to his fans, and he never went on like this big head trip, you know, like Michael Bolton or, you know, Tom Dreesen.
Mama just killed a man. Put a gun up to his head. Pull the trigger, bang, he's dead. Mama, life had just begun.
John continued to perform as an opening act with a string of club dates into the early 1980s.
And I was able, as a result of some of this interest in his resurging career, to get him booked at the Trump Casino, opening for Pia Zadora. And it was, I think this was going to be the one thing that could lead to a comeback.
Tell them all to get a smoking caterpillar to give you a call. Call Alice when she's 10 feet tall. And men.
He got a telegram saying that Manya, who was like built like a truck and we all thought would last forever, was starting to rust, so to speak, and was going to like meet her beloved Jesus. So he rushed home, canceled the Trump Casino gig, gave up a lot of money.
So the old lady's sick. She was old. I mean, she was going to die, but you know, you got to think of your career. This is his one chance to make it, and he just blew it. He just took off, and that was it. And so we sort of had a parting again of ways. I didn't want to manage him after that. I just didn't want to. I had other clients. I had other people that were interested in what I was telling them and would take my advice as a professional.
My mother became seriously ill, and where was John? I asked, where was John? He was off saying he was doing whatever it is that John does, whatever it is John has always done. I was there, I was in the house, took care of her, I kept her company, I changed dressings, I did everything for her. Suddenly, lo and behold, it's the 11th hour, John shows up. John shows up, St. John, out of nowhere, mother's adorable little John, and suddenly he comes back, and where am I? I'm like suddenly this ghost wandering through the house, and I might as well not be there at all. And suddenly, you know, John is back, and John is everything, and John's wonderful, and oh look, John has come to see me, and John. And she dies, he gets the house. You tell me, is this fair or what?
The loss of his mother propelled John into a deep depression and preoccupation with what he called the next realm.
Ouija boards, candles, seances, you name it, we did it. John would be inviting me over, he'd have people over, and the whole thing is just like suddenly, you know, after my mother died, this, what can I call it, but an obsession with trying to get her back. It's like, and I'm not saying that he had a guilt about not being there while she was sick. I don't know, but maybe they just always had this, you know, special little mother-son connection that I suppose me, I was the daughter, I just don't understand, whatever. But he was always doing these things, and he would have other willing participants, and we had mediums, we had just about every darn thing you could think of.
About an hour into it, he left the room and came back in claiming that this crucifix had fallen off the wall. So we stayed for a little while longer, and then we left.
Out of despair and loneliness, John tried to revive his career, leading to what would become his final performance.
He begged me to try to get him a gig. Well, you know, he'd been out of the circuit. Nobody knew who he was at that point.
And he booked John in this comedy club called the Comedy Room. and didn't tell John until the last minute that he was going to be opening up for a bunch of comedians who, for an audience, who like, they didn't come to see John, they came to see these bozos who were like, every other word was the F word, you know?
That's when John realized he couldn't hide from the fact that people thought he was basically a novelty act. And that when he sang White Rabbit, and people thought he was funny. They didn't think that he was fun or cool or hip or anything. It was just, they just thought he was pathetic.
He prepared some stuff for it. Now, John had written this song, Luca. You may have heard of this song. Years later, this woman, what's her name, Vega woman, Suzanne Vega, she made a hit out of it. And, you know, who knew? I wish I had a piece of that. But I didn't know John was going to, you know, write something that somebody else would pick up. But anyway, that's what he was going to sing at this comedy club. He got up on stage and he started doing this thing, and it's hard to describe, but he's got kind of this blanket thing on, and he starts singing the song, and of course, it's a comedy club. People are there looking for comedy, so they start laughing. They start laughing out loud.
My name is Luca. I live on the second floor. Hanging upstairs from here. Yes, I think you've seen me before. If you hear something late at night, some kind of trouble, some kind of fight, just don't ask me what it was. Just don't ask me what it was. Just don't ask me what it was.
And so he breaks down. He stops singing, leaves the stage, and that's it. That's the end of his career. I mean, as far as I was concerned, his career ended back at the Trump Casino, but this was a last-ditch effort. And, you know, he should have just stayed on stage. A pro goes through. He doesn't stop. A pro stays on stage and works with it.
Caught him backstage, and I wanted to tell him how great he was. You know, I fucking slapped him on the back. The dude was a zombie. He was out of it.
He became basically little more than a mumbling presence in the mode of his mother. John mumbled bye too, but I don't think it's bye they killed him. I think it was more like the bye that they laughed at me. He lived in that big house by himself, and he started collecting cats.
And he had these like long Fu Manchu fingernails, you know, and he didn't bathe, and he would grow his own potatoes and fertilize them with his own waste. And he wore like Kleenex boxes for slippers, you know, and it was just really pathetic. He was pathetic, and we didn't recognize him.
He advertised for a young, attractive man to come and take care of some of the cats. And that's how he met his final friend, his personal secretary.
I don't know, we kind of talked, and it was nice, and we hit it off big time. I moved in with him and became his personal assistant right after New Year's 1987. And I did everything for that man. I cooked, I cleaned, I just did everything. I mean, I am a Cancer rising, and we are the wet nurses of the zodiac, so it was a natural fit. He was helpless.
We kind of thought that maybe, you know, Drew had, you know, ulterior motives, like, you know what I mean?
John and I fought, like any couple.
of guys who live together, fight, will do. But I always knew that no matter what was said, we'd always see it through, you know? I don't know. At times it got really ugly. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna make it pretty. It wasn't pretty. It got to be hurtful and mean. But I always, at those times, I knew that if I just did my 3 R's, I'd get through. The 3 R rule, you know? Relate, release, and relax.
Drew Burke was supposed to be John's personal assistant. Okay, now I have no idea where you find a job description for personal assistant. I don't know exactly what he was assisting John with, although I certainly have my ideas. I don't know what you've heard from anybody else.
You know, I could tolerate a lot of things with John. I could tolerate the manic depression, the alcoholism, the poor hygiene. But I told him straight out, I cannot deal with your paper chewing habit. It was disgusting. No, sir, I would have a paper bag full of wet Kleenex and come and find him on the couch, eating one after the other, littering the floor again. And it was, so I mean, I'm reliving it now as we speak. But he once told me he ate them while snowbound, and that wasn't a lie. I mean, he was nuts for it. He loved 3-ply bounties.
I do have to wonder exactly what Drew was getting paid for. He was there all the time.
His sister and I were never what you'd call close. I mean, you know, and she was even more hygienically challenged than he was.
And I had to wonder what his role was there, this Drew Burke. I mean, I think he was using John the way John had used so many other people.
I'd like to go on record here. John Connors did not throw me out. I chose to leave. There's a difference. I spent 4 years of my life with that man, and I knew there was only one way he was going, and that was down. And I just couldn't watch it. You know, you can give so much. And I had been reading a lot of Deepak Chopra and Shirley MacLaine, and I just knew that I had to make a choice here, and the choice was me. It's not selfish, it's spiritual. So I packed my things up and I left. I felt just like Tina Turner leaving Ike.
February 1991. John was 44 years old. He had lost family, career, and his final companion. All that he had left was a handful of loyal fans.
We, the CBGB'S, we've been leading this campaign to have a street named after him in Harvey, you know, like Tom Dreesen has Tom Dreesen Way. Well, we think that, you know, John was just as good an ambassador of Harvey as Tom Dreesen is. And so we're selling a commemorative coin that it's legal tender in St. Thomas, a commemorative coin. It's bigger than an American dollar. And, you know, you can go on a cruise and you can spend it. Also, the White Hen Pantry on Torrance Avenue in Harvey will also accept the John Connors commemorative coin as legal tender. And so all the proceeds from this coin go to help our campaign to get a street named after John Connors in Harvey. I pulled this wacky stunt, you know, we were trying to get, you know, a petition signed. We're going to give it to the mayor of Harvey. And I chained myself to a street sign. And, you know, I was there for 5 days, signing up, you know, people who came by. And, you know, we got such a warm reception. You know, the CBGB'S, we were so pleased with the result.
The whereabouts of John Connors remains a mystery to this day.
I think he's dead. I don't think he's alive, because I think if John was alive, I'd probably hear from him. He'd probably be calling me up, trying, after all these years, to get him some gig, get him booked somewhere. He always came back to me.
I think he's a male nut.
There were rumors that some of Mania's mob connections may have had something to do with his disappearance, but I think John is out there somewhere. And I think that he knows that wherever he is, the CBGB'S are his true friends. And I think that one day, John will come back to us.
He could be a bad person someplace, I don't know. I'm sort of think, though, he always had this obsession with my mother. My mother always had an obsession with him. And we went through that whole seance, medium stage, and I have often wondered if he has somehow been trying to contact, and perhaps successfully contact, my mother. And as far as I'm concerned, they're welcome to each other. If he has found some way to cross the astral plane, and they can be together, and they can be happy, and they can be out of my hair, hey, so much the better.
And so the mystery of John Connors goes on, as do the remembrances of a strange life lived by an even stranger young crooner from Chicago.
Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness, although a tear may be ever so near. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.